It was late, much later than I'd expected to be in the office. The city skyline, as always, stretched out before me from the floor-to-ceiling windows of my office, the lights of Manhattan twinkling like 1,000 small promises. But tonight they were empty. My mind, however, was not. The numbers on the spreadsheets in front of me blurred as I tried to focus on a meeting that had taken place earlier in the day. The conference call had been routine, but something had gnawed at me all afternoon. A feeling, a hunch, an itch that something wasn't quite right. My phone buzzed, pulling me back to reality. It was an email from Laura Green, one of the few people I trusted in this world. She was a lawyer, but not just any lawyer. Laura had been my confidant for years, someone I'd known long before Carter and Hayes Global even existed. Subject: urgent. We need to talk about Josh. Josh. The name hit me like a punch to the gut. Joshua Hayes was more than just a business partner. He was my best friend. We had started the company together, built it from the ground up. But as I clicked open the message, the weight in my chest grew heavier. James, something's not right. I've seen some things I think you need to know about. It's about Josh and Emily. Please come to my office tomorrow morning. We need to discuss. I felt a cold chill run through me. Emily, my wife, the woman I had trusted with everything. I should have known better. But how could I have ever imagined that the two people I held most dear could betray me? I stood up abruptly, my chair scraping loudly against the polished floor. My mind raced, calculating, wondering just how deep the deception ran. The betrayal was so personal, so intricately planned, that it made my blood run cold. Emily, the woman who had stood beside me in our shared mission of charity, of a better world. How could she be involved in something like this? I wasn't a fool. I knew the business well enough to see the signs of financial misdeeds, the quiet whisper of fraudulent deals. But a lover's betrayal? That was a different kind of knife, buried deep in the back. And the fact that Josh, my closest friend, was tangled in it only made it worse. The phone buzzed again. Another message from Laura. If you have any doubt, I can get proof. But you need to act fast. I closed my eyes, fighting the wave of emotion that threatened to overwhelm me. Betrayal, revenge, and the brutal clarity that I had been the fool. The pieces fell into place, a puzzle I had been unwilling to solve until now. Emily and Josh. They were in this together, but I wasn't going to let them get away with it. Not after everything we'd built. I turned toward the window, my reflection staring back at me. The lights of the city seemed so distant now, as if they belonged to another life. No, this wasn't just business anymore. This was personal. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I paced my apartment, unable to rid myself of the thoughts gnawing at my mind. Betrayal. The kind that cuts deeper than anything. I had built my empire from nothing, clawed my way to the top with cold precision. And now, I was facing the very people I trusted the most, my wife and my best friend, colluding against me. The next morning, I went straight to Laura's office. There was no time to waste. Laura was waiting for me, sitting behind her desk, her face grim. She had a folder in front of her, and I could see the edge of a few papers peeking out. Her calm demeanor, the way she always carried herself, did nothing to settle the storm inside me. In fact, it only made the situation feel more real. James, she began, her voice steady, I've looked into it. Everything you've suspected is true. Emily and Josh are not only having an affair, but they've been conspiring to sell part of Carter and Hayes Global to one of our biggest competitors. I clenched my fists at my sides, my jaw tightening. I knew something was off, I muttered, mostly to myself. But I didn't want to see it. Laura nodded, her eyes hardening as she continued. They've been siphoning money, using your name to negotiate behind your back. Emily and Josh have been in contact with the board members of the rival company for months. It's all coming together now. I leaned forward, my eyes narrowing. And how do we stop this? I've gathered evidence. It's all here, Laura said, sliding the folder across the desk. This isn't just a matter of personal betrayal. This could destroy your company. We need to act fast, before they make any moves. I flipped open the folder. The first page was a copy of an email between Emily and Josh, discussing their plan to transfer company assets. The next pages were financial documents, showing irregular transactions, hidden funds, and most damning of all, signed agreements with our competitors. I let out a long breath, my mind racing. I'm not going to confront them directly. Not yet. If I do that, I give them the upper hand. I'll ruin them both carefully. I'll expose Josh's corruption, and I'll make sure Emily gets nothing out of this. But we need to be surgical. One wrong move, and everything falls apart. Laura nodded in agreement. I understand. We need to destroy them without them knowing we're coming. I sat back in my chair, the weight of what I had to do sinking in. It wasn't enough to just expose them. I needed to make them pay, not only for the betrayal of my trust, but for threatening the empire I'd built. They would learn that in my world, betrayal wasn't met with mercy. The plan began the moment I walked out of Laura's office. I worked silently, methodically, gathering every scrap of evidence, tracking every transaction, and linking them all back to Josh. I had been in this business long enough to know how to play the game. The key was to destroy their credibility, to make them appear as weak as possible, and then strike when they least expected it. I started with Josh. I knew that in his mind, he was still untouchable, too smart, too slick to fall. He thought he was invincible, that his manipulations would go unnoticed, but I was about to shatter that illusion. My first step was to dig into his financials. If I could expose his embezzlement, his deals with our competitors, I could ruin him in the eyes of the business world. It wasn't long before I found what I was looking for: hidden offshore accounts, unreported transactions, and backdoor deals. The man I had once called my best friend had been playing me for a fool. But I wasn't finished yet. The next step was to involve Laura. We needed to make sure we had every piece of evidence, every email, every transaction, every phone call. I couldn't afford a single misstep. I wasn't just going to destroy Josh's career. I was going to ruin him, make sure no one would ever trust him again. And while all of this was happening, Emily was moving in the shadows, oblivious to my plan. She believed that once she and Josh had their share of the company, they could live their lives free from me. I would make sure that never happened. I didn't want to break her heart, but in business, there was no room for weakness. I played my part with precision. Every email I sent, every phone call I made, everything was calculated. Laura worked tirelessly by my side, handling the legal side of things, compiling evidence. The plan to expose Josh was taking shape, and with it, the moment of his downfall was inevitable. It was only a matter of time before the public fallout began. The first leak came in the form of a confidential whistleblower report, a carefully crafted document outlining Josh's financial misdeeds and his secret negotiations with the competitor. Laura had made sure it landed in the hands of the right people. Within hours, the news was everywhere. Josh's name, once associated with success and power, was now synonymous with scandal and corruption. The business world reacted quickly. His former partners abandoned him. The board members who had once trusted him now openly condemned his actions. His reputation was destroyed in a matter of days, and with it, any hope he had of recovering his career. I watched it all unfold from the comfort of my office, my face impassive as the headlines blared. I felt no joy in his misery, no satisfaction, but I also didn't feel remorse. He had earned it. The blowback didn't stop with Josh. Emily, thinking she could separate herself from the chaos, tried to pull away from the wreckage, but her actions had sealed her fate. The affair, the betrayal of both her husband and her best friend, it all came to light. Her public image, which had once been that of a beloved socialite and philanthropist, was now tarnished beyond repair. When she found out the extent of what had happened, I could see the panic in her eyes. She had been too confident, too sure that her position as my wife would protect her from any consequences. But she was wrong. I never intended to ruin her completely, not like I had with Josh. But I wasn't going to let her walk away with anything, either. We were getting a divorce, but it was going to be a clean break. She would get nothing except what she had brought into the marriage. No assets, no leverage. I had made sure of that. She tried to fight it at first. She tried to claim that she deserved something, anything, for her years of partnership in the company. But I was firm. There were no negotiations left to be had. My decision had been made. She would walk away with nothing. Not a dime of the wealth she had helped me build, not a single share in the company she had tried to destroy. When the divorce was finalized, I watched her walk away from the life we had built together. There was no grand gesture, no reconciliation. It ended as coldly and efficiently as any other business transaction. And yet, in the pit of my stomach, there was a feeling I couldn't quite name. Was it satisfaction? No. I was beyond that. Was it regret? Perhaps. A small part of me wondered if things could have been different, if I had seen the warning signs sooner. But I couldn't allow myself to indulge in such thoughts. I had made my choices, and they had led me here. Now, with both Josh and Emily out of the picture, I had one focus: the company. The company was teetering on the edge. My personal life had collapsed, but Carter and Hayes Global had to survive. This was my lifeline, the last remnant of everything I had fought for. And so, I steeled myself. I brought in a new team of investors. People without the baggage of past corruption, people who had the vision to take the company forward. With their backing, we began restructuring. We shifted focus to emerging technologies, blockchain, AI, the future of finance. We cut loose the dead weight, including any employees tied to Josh's schemes. I worked tirelessly, rebuilding what had been shattered. It wasn't just about repairing the company. It was about proving that I could recover from this. The world had thought I was finished, but they had underestimated me. In the midst of this upheaval, I started to see the light. Carter and Hayes was going to come out of this stronger than ever. Investors were slowly coming back. The media had turned their attention elsewhere, but I had gained control of the narrative. The company would survive, and I would ensure it thrived. But as the pieces began to fall into place, I couldn't help but wonder about the people I had lost along the way. Was it all worth it? Was the price of power and success worth the destruction of the relationships I had once held dear? The office was quieter now. The chaos of the last few weeks had settled into a kind of tense calm, but beneath the surface, I could feel the storm still swirling. The company had been salvaged, but my personal life was in ruins, and the city outside my window, once a symbol of everything I had built, now felt like a cold, distant thing. But I wasn't done. Not by a long shot. I had stabilized Carter and Hayes, restructured it to focus on new technologies, new markets, and a new vision. The investors were beginning to trickle back, and our stock prices had started to climb again. The company was alive, and that meant I had a chance to rebuild. Still, there was one last thing to deal with: Josh. I had seen the headlines. He was trying to crawl his way back, working with small-time startups, trying to salvage his reputation. I'd heard rumors that he was even thinking of approaching me, of trying to beg for a second chance. But I wasn't about to give him that. The door to my office swung open, and I looked up to see him standing there. For a moment, I almost didn't recognize him. He looked smaller than I remembered, his posture slumped, his eyes a little wild, as if he wasn't sure whether he belonged in this world anymore. "James," he began, his voice hesitant. "We need to talk." I leaned back in my chair, arms crossed, not bothering to rise. "You got 5 minutes. Make it count." Josh stepped into the room, closing the door behind him. He was wearing a tailored suit, but it didn't look right on him anymore. His confidence was gone. He looked like a man who had been brought to his knees, and he had. But I wasn't about to show him any sympathy. "I know what you're thinking," he said, his voice shaking slightly. "That I'm just trying to worm my way back into your good graces. But I'm not. I'm asking for a chance, just one chance to rebuild what I lost. I know I made a mistake, but I can fix it, James. I know I can." I studied him for a long moment, watching his every move. The man who had once been my closest friend was now a shadow of himself. I could see the desperation in his eyes, but that only made my decision easier. "You really don't get it, do you?" I said, my voice cold. "You're not here because you think you can fix things. You're here because you have nothing left. You're trying to salvage your reputation, your career, your pride. But you can't fix what's broken. Not this time." Josh's face reddened, and he took a step forward. "I know I betrayed you, I know." I held up a hand to stop him. "Don't waste your breath, Josh. You're done. You burned every bridge you had, and now you're looking for a way back. But it's over. You made your choice, and I've made mine." There was a long silence. I could see the fight leave his eyes, replaced by something darker, something I hadn't expected. "I guess I deserve this," he muttered, his voice barely audible. "I never should have." I cut him off. You never should have betrayed me. You never should have thought you could take what was mine without paying the price. Josh stood there, silent, as if the weight of his failure was crushing him. I could see his hands trembling slightly, his shoulders slumped in defeat. I didn't feel sorry for him. Not anymore. I had no room for weakness, no room for mercy. Not after everything he had done. Get out, I said, my voice firm. And don't ever come back. He nodded, not looking me in the eye as he turned and left the room. The door clicked shut behind him, and I sat back in my chair, staring at the space where he had been. I knew that this was the last time I would see him. Josh's fall had been inevitable, and now it was complete. There was no redemption for him. He had chosen his path, and now he would have to walk it alone. That same day, Emily called. I didn't know what I expected from her. Perhaps a plea for forgiveness, or maybe some kind of emotional confrontation. But what she said was different. I want to talk, she said, her voice steady but cold. I'm not asking for anything from you. I need closure. We both do. I didn't respond immediately. Part of me wanted to tell her to go to hell, to leave me alone and let me move on with my life. But I knew I couldn't avoid her forever. So I agreed. We met at a cafe in the city, a quiet, neutral place where we wouldn't be interrupted. As soon as I saw her, I felt the weight of the past crash down on me. She had always been beautiful, always carried herself with such grace. But now, there was something different in her eyes, something lost. James, she began, her voice soft, I know you're angry. And I know I don't have the right to ask you for anything. But I want you to understand that I never meant to hurt you. I was lost in Josh. Josh made me believe that leaving was the only way forward. But I see now that I was wrong. I met her gaze, my expression unreadable. You betrayed me, Emily. You betrayed everything we built together. I don't know how you expect me to ever trust you again. She nodded, her eyes filled with a kind of sorrow that I couldn't bring myself to feel. I understand. I wanted you to know that I never wanted it to end like this. I wish I could turn back time, but I can't. There was a long silence between us, and for a moment, I thought about everything we had gone through together. The good, the bad, and the ugly. But in the end, the truth was clear. There was no going back. I don't need your apology, I said flatly. I've moved on, and so should you. Her eyes shimmered with something close to tears, but she quickly wiped them away. Goodbye, James. She stood up and walked away, leaving me sitting there alone. This chapter was officially closed. There would be no more regrets, no more second chances. I had learned a valuable lesson through all of this. In the business world, betrayal was inevitable. But it wasn't the betrayal that defined you. It was how you responded to it. And as I watched Emily disappear into the crowd, I realized that I had come out on top. The company was thriving, and my position was more secure than ever. I had won. It's strange, the way time moves after everything falls apart. In the beginning, you think the pain of loss and betrayal will consume you. You think it will be the end, but it's not. It's just the beginning. The beginning of something else, something bigger. Carter and Hayes Global was rising from the ashes, and so was I. My decisions, the sacrifices, the coldness with which I had severed ties with Josh and Emily, it was all worth it. The company had regained its footing, and we were expanding into new markets, dominating sectors in artificial intelligence, blockchain, and fintech. Our international presence had never been stronger. I remember standing in our new office in Silicon Valley, looking out over the sprawling landscape of tech giants, with the sun setting over the horizon. I was here to stay, and I was going to make sure no one would ever take my place. James, a voice interrupted my thoughts. I turned to see Anna walking toward me. She was tall, with dark hair and sharp eyes, the kind of woman who could walk into any room and command attention without saying a word. We had met at a venture capital summit in Europe a few months ago, and from the moment I saw her, I knew she was different. There was a fire in her that matched my own, and I admired that. How's the deal with the Chinese investors going? She asked, her tone both professional and casual. I smiled, stepping forward to meet her. It's going well. Their interest is solid, and I think we'll be able to sign by next week. After that, we'll be able to accelerate our expansion even further. Good. She raised an eyebrow, glancing out the window. You know, the press still loves the idea of you, James. The comeback kid. The man who turned everything around after losing it all. I chuckled, but there was something hollow about the way I laughed. It's not a comeback if you never really fall. I was never out of the game. Anna leaned against the edge of my desk, a small smirk on her lips. Is that what you tell yourself? I didn't answer right away. I wasn't lying to her, but the truth was complicated. Yes, I had survived. Yes, I had rebuilt. But there were parts of me, parts of my soul, that would never be the same. And maybe that's how it had to be. You can't reach the top without paying the price. She studied me for a moment, then stepped closer. You're not alone, James. You don't have to be. I'm in this with you, all the way. We could build something even bigger than what you had before. I looked at her, really looked at her. There was something in her eyes that was different from anyone else I had known before. Something genuine, something real. Maybe that was what I needed. After everything, after the betrayals, the loneliness, I needed someone who could stand by me, someone who understood the cost of this life, someone who wouldn't run away when things got hard. I know, I said softly, almost to myself. I think you're right. I can't do this alone anymore. 5 years had passed since the fallout. Carter and Hayes was now a leading player in the world of fintech and emerging technologies. We were no longer just a company. We were a force, global, unstoppable. I stood in our headquarters in New York City, the building buzzing with energy, the staff focused on the next big project. I had done it. I had rebuilt everything and more. The stock was at an all-time high. Investors were clamoring to get in, and I was at the center of it all. My phone buzzed on my desk, and I looked down to see a message from Anna. Are you free for dinner tonight? I smiled and tapped out a reply. You're always on my mind. The sound of the city outside my office window had a new meaning now. The clamor of the streets, the constant flow of life. It was no longer overwhelming. It was a symbol of everything I had built, everything I had fought for. And as I leaned back in my chair, looking out at the world I now controlled, I finally allowed myself to feel something I hadn't allowed myself to feel in years. Peace. The last 5 years had been a blur. It was all so fast, too fast maybe, but I had made it through. I had faced the betrayals, the losses, and emerged on the other side stronger than ever. The company was thriving, and so was I. But sometimes, in the quiet moments when no one was around, I would find myself thinking about Emily and Josh. Where were they now? What had they become in the aftermath of everything? Did they regret their actions? Or had they found peace in their own way? I would never know. And in the end, it didn't matter. They had their choices, and I had mine. Now, my life was about more than just business. It was about legacy. It was about the future I was building, not just for myself, but for those who would follow. Carter and Hayes was more than just a company now. It was a testament to survival, to resilience, and to the strength of someone who refused to let go. As I stood at the window of my penthouse office, looking down at the city below, I realized that I had everything I had ever wanted. Success, power, control. But most importantly, I had finally found the one thing that mattered more than all of that: peace. And I knew, deep down, that this was just the beginning.